Welcome to TUI's special coverage on Budget 2023. Today we have with us renowned economist Gurcharan Das, and he is going to tell us what we can expect from the Union budget and the road ahead for the Indian economy. Hi, sir. Welcome to the show. Sir, my first question to you is that given the global headwinds, how decoupled is the India growth story?
Well, you're absolutely right. That is a very important question because the global headwinds are very real and very severe. 1/3 of the world economy is expected to go into recession. And under these circumstances, it will affect. We are still not a major global player, major global exporter, but still we are linked enough to, it will affect our exports. It will affect some of the, it will have an effect on remittances. It will affect other connections that we have with the global economy. So yes, we are coupled. Fortunately, not so deeply coupled as the exporting countries, the big exporting countries are.
Okay. So my next question to you is that what is your top expectation from this year's union budget? Does the government have room to push through any major reforms?
Well, given this global circumstance, and also given the fact that India's economy is in reasonably good shape in comparison to the world, I would say, it's tempting to always go for growth. For a poor country, it's the best way to create jobs in the future. But I think the right thing under these circumstances will be to hold the fiscal deficit. The expectation is at 6.4%, should the fiscal deficit. I think that, we should improve on that. We have by 2025, 26, the target is to come down to 4.5. That means we have to improve it at 2 percentage points a year. So the temptation, so we have to improve it. But given the state of the world economy, I doubt if we can improve it. And so there must be an effort to hold on to 6.4%. I think we should not try and go for growth, which would be a temptation in such a circumstances, given the fact that there is momentum and buoyancy in the Indian economy.
Okay, fair enough. So, as you said, there is a need to stick to the fiscal consolidation path. But within whatever constraints that the finance minister has, what should be the quality of her capex expenditure?
Well, a lot depends on what our revenue expectations are for next year. In other words, the government's this year has been buoyant, up 25%. Last year was buoyant as well. And next year, the question is, it's an uncertainty that how will we be able to continue this tax momentum? So if there is, if we can, continue the tax momentum, and there is some room for an aggressive capex, I would say the best way really is via infrastructure, and the National Infrastructure Pipeline, NIP, is really the low-hanging fruit on which to hang our capex expenditure. Those. Plus, I would say there's room for efficiency in the spending that we do. Particularly the leftists are always screaming, oh, you should spend more on education. Well, the issue in education spending is not more spending. The issue is efficiency of spending because 1 out of 4 teachers is absent. 1 out of 2 who is present in a government school, I'm talking about a government primary school, 1 out of 2 who is present is not teaching. And so what does the poor person do? And even middle class abandoned government schools decades ago, but now even the poor have abandoned. Today, 48% of India's children are in private schools, and they have given up the free meals, the free uniforms, the free school books that they get in a government school to spend their hard-earned money on education, their children. And so it's not a question of just spending more. Yes, I mean, I would say there is a need to improve spending, take advantage of the digital revolution. There's a lot, if you can provide a digital board in the classroom, you can access the best. You can access the way the children can learn English, the way we are speaking English, rather than through their teachers who don't know very much English to speak of. So anyway, my point is, yes, if you look at zero budgeting, you see lots of efficiency. Then there's, if your privatization program, really, I mean, that's a disgrace, frankly. They have, that privatization group has missed its target year after year after year. Now, in any decent organization, those people would be sacked, and so you need to bring that energy, the kind of energy that you had when Arun Shourie was the minister, a tremendous energy during time of Vajpayee, and bring energy to the privatization. So privatization will give you more resources, cost improvement, efficiency in spending on the various other programs will give you. But frankly, overall, there is not much room because 75% of the spending is, I mean, mandatory. It's salaries, it's defense, it's pensions, and it's our obligations. The debt servicing. Debt servicing is now 30%. That's another reason why we have to keep the fiscal consolidation path on, because already we are a very heavily indebted country. And with that high public, 10% between states and center, the fiscal deficit is 10%. And so I would say that the room is limited. 75% of expenditure is mandatory. Government has no real ability to do anything about it. So we can work with that 25% and try and get the more revenue through privatization and through efficiency of spending.
Okay, fair enough. So my next question to you is that what can the government do to enhance ease of doing business?
Well, I think that, in the last few years, I have to commend the finance minister for improving the tax administration. The whole business of faceless assessments in direct taxes has been revolutionary. I mean, I haven't had to see the face of a tax person. Neither has my CA seen the face of a tax person. That's because the person who's assessing you is somewhere else. He could be sitting in Timbuktu, in Guwahati or somewhere. And he has no way of calling you and doing a midnight knock and saying, pay up some money into my pocket. So it has reduced corruption also. But it's also reduced some of the uh, harassment. And harassment still is there in indirect taxes. It's in indirect taxes, and it's a more difficult job. And I know the department is doing good work. They are trying to get in customs. I know that they're trying to bring a kind of faceless assessment, as exists in many other countries.
Recently, in an interview, Raghuram Rajan said, in fact, he raised doubts on the efficacy of the production linked incentive scheme. So, what, in your opinion, A, has been the achievement of the PLI scheme so far? What are the challenges and what are the sectors that the government should focus on?
So, what I'm going to say is that the PLI scheme today incentivizes production. I feel that in addition to production, we ought to find a way to incentivize, make it an export-oriented scheme. So incentivize export. India has not been a successful exporting nation. Less than 2% is our global market share of global exports. And global exports are $24 trillion in goods alone. And so I would say that incentivize exports, and also if we can either do PLI for sectors that are labor intensive to create jobs, or even the existing ones. Sometimes it's a very close call. Should you invest in the latest machine, or is the current technology good enough, and that creates more jobs? So if you create some kind of incentive for people, so they don't become uncompetitive, but at least on the margin calls where there's low-hanging fruit, that they will employ people. And so, given that the country's imperative is jobs, and these jobs can be achieved through labor-intensive exports, I would configure the PLI scheme in that direction. And I don't agree with Raghuram Rajan in this respect, that I believe that there are a lot of sectors, a lot has happened, which will yield over time. We've seen it in the telecom. I mean, we've seen it in mobile phones, how a kind of revolution is created, and in making. We are the largest now, one of the largest markets. I mean, one of the two largest markets in the world, and so I feel that I would have a PLI scheme that will allow Indian companies to join up with the global the supply chain. The global supply chain, if we can become part of the global supply chain, then our exports will boom. And so, our tariffs are too high. So I would put a sunset clause on tariffs in every PLI contract to tell the manufacturer that that's it. This is an infant industry argument. And you are not going to be an infant after 5 years. And so you'll have to compete in the global economy. So really, that would be a way to improve PLI and also create jobs and also create exports.
Okay, as a follow-up to what you have suggested in terms of improvements for the PLI scheme, my next question is what the government can do in terms of generating employment, and I would need more ideas from you apart from what you said on the PLI. A recent report said that over 1.4 crore less people are employed in the country compared to what they were in the pre-pandemic era. So, in that sense, what can the budget do to promote employment?
Employment, of course, is created by the private sector. So the last thing we should say to the government is create jobs. The government can only incentivize the process. Secondly, I would say that yes, that's absolutely correct. This is the question, jobs. India has had a good record since 1991. This is 30 years now have gone by. In these 30 years, we've had an average of almost 7% growth. I mean, for a democracy to do that, that's quite amazing. And compared to the first 40 years after independence, when our growth rate was like 3.5%, now it's been 7%, double. In the meantime, population growth has come down. It was 2.2 population growth before. After 91, basically, it's been coming down to about 1.5. So the growth is now, we have a decent per capita income growth as well. So what's the problem? The problem is that we have not created enough jobs through this growth model. We seem to have skipped the Industrial Revolution, going directly from the Green Revolution to a services revolution. Now, of course, both Green Revolution and Services Revolution are job creating as well. There is a multiplier, but the manufacturing stage has a bigger multiplier. And that we have skipped. I mean, a country like India, which has only 15% of its GDP in manufacturing, that's too low. It should be double of that. Countries like us should be double of that. And that would create a manufacturing revolution. That would create jobs and so on. So yes, your point is right, that the challenge for the country is jobs. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic, and we have to recover it. And the question now in the future is whether we can do it or not. I believe that we have very good reasons to continue with a 7% growth rate. But we would have to make the 7% growth rate more labor intensive, more export oriented, as we talked about, more, for example, housing and tourism are the two biggest creators of jobs. Tourism, the amount of tourists we get, less than Singapore, look at Singapore, one little city, gets more foreign tourists than India, whole of India does. I mean, that's a disgrace. Less than Thailand, so much less than Thailand. So I believe those are the areas which are labor intensive. And fortunately, the real estate economy is improving now. And so with that, housing should pick up, and that should take up bring some labor. Construction, housing should bring that up. But it's absolutely right that every time we think of the Indian economy, the first question should be jobs. And, our labor participation rate in India is in the low 40s. It should be 60. That's a 20-point differential. And 20 points means 200 million jobs. 20 crore jobs are missing. And the worst statistic is female participation in the economy. It used to be 30%. Now it's down to 24. So we really our work cut out. We have our work cut out when it comes to jobs. I believe we can still create an industrial revolution. We can still go after labor-intensive exports. And it's such a big opportunity. I mean, 25 trillion is the opportunity there. Dollars I'm talking about. And with only a 2%, I mean, if you can just take our share from 1.7 to 3.4, you'll solve the job problem.
Okay, so my last question to you is, what is the long-term road ahead for the Indian economy? What is your vision?
Well, India has been growing at 7% a year in the last 30 years, since 1991. This is an amazing achievement for a democracy, and we should be proud. Of course, we should have done 8, 9, but a democracy won't allow that to happen. So there is a cost, but we'd rather be democratic, I think. Now, the question is, can we continue the 7% growth path? And I believe there are at least, I think, of 10 reasons why. I won't bother you with all 10, but there are at least 10 reasons why I believe that we should grow at 7%. One of them is that we have, well, the first is the cumulative effect of the reforms. You know, the reforms add up. And in Modi's time, you've had the IBC, you've got the GST. So these are added reforms that have helped. Now, if you look further beyond this, I would say the infrastructure in our country has considerably improved. Between 2011 and 2021, the road network in our country has doubled. So that's a very big deal. It improves your logistics, the ability to move, the savings in transport. Then you've had a digital revolution. A digital revolution is the fact that something like less than half the Indians had a bank account. Today, almost 85% of Indians, thanks to Jan Dhan Yojana, thanks to Aadhaar, thanks to mobile phones. And you saw this in the DBT transfers. They reach the person that they are intended for. And that's why Modi keeps getting elected, partly, because finally the money is not lost in between through middlemen. And I mentioned GST. GST has really made it had difficulties starting, etc. Still improvements are needed. But it has created one India. And I'm on the board of a number of consumer product companies like Procter & Gamble, Gillette, and so on. And we find significant savings, not having to have a distribution center, a warehouse in every state. You know, it improves the efficiency of moving goods, etc. And also dealing. I mean, you're dealing only with one. You don't have to deal with every state sales department who's out to get the pound of flesh. All these octroi nakas and all have gone. I mean, they were a source of great. Then the great opportunity is the energy transition that's coming. The energy transition. You know, today, almost half the foreign exchange we earn every year, half the exports gains, we lose because of costs of buying imported petroleum. Now, once solar energy and other forms of energy take over from the electric scooters, electric bikes, and wind energy and others, I think really we will have energy transition, I mentioned, as a very big area. And finally, I think I mean, I could go on, but the key point is that there are enough reasons now to believe that this is India's moment. We could go even better than 7. That would be great. But even at 7, India will be one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And we will be able to become a middle class country with $10,000 per capita income compared to $2,200 today, which means that we are not going to be a rich country, but the poor and the middle classes will be with some ease.